Why did no one help her? That question would echo long after the night was over, after the laughter died, after the truth surfaced like a ghost from the dark. But for now, all that filled the grand ballroom of Fort Bragg's Officers' Club was the shattering sound of crystal and the gasp that followed. The wine glass hit marble like gunfire. A spray of red, deep, expensive, and merciless, splattered across Colonel Marcus Webb's immaculate dress blues. The Bordeaux dripped down his medals, each droplet catching the light like blood under chandeliers. The woman responsible stood frozen, her right hand trembling in thick white bandages. Her gray shirt was 2 sizes too big, her skirt old enough to have served in another decade. The wine bottle dangled awkwardly from her left hand. "I am so sorry," she stammered. Her voice trembled, barely audible over the gasps. Around her, 200 officers and their spouses stared with the same expression, disbelief curdling into disdain. In that world of metals and diamonds, of power polished to a mirror shine, she was an intrusion, a stain. Colonel Webb's face darkened, his anger rising like heat from asphalt. "You worthless piece of trash," he barked, his voice booming across the hall. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" He stood 6'2", all hard lines and decorated authority. The type of man who filled every room like a storm cloud. His shoulders squared, his chest gleaming with years of service, his jaw carved in fury. "Who let a crippled parasite like you into this room?" he snarled. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. It was worse. It was restrained, polite, the kind that hides behind champagne flutes and sideways glances. The kind that says we're too important to care. Sarah Mitchell shrank under it. Her hair, brown with faint gold tones that might have been beautiful once, hung in limp strands. She didn't raise her eyes. Her injured hand trembled against her chest, wrapped in bandages like a shame she couldn't hide. But a few people noticed something else, something subtle. A shift of weight, a stance too balanced for a frightened woman. Feet shoulder-width apart, knees soft, posture unconsciously grounded. A fighter's reflex buried beneath fragility. Jake Wilson noticed. The retired Delta Force operator sat alone near the back, his bourbon untouched now, eyes narrowing. Something about the way she stood didn't fit. It was muscle memory, not meekness. Discipline, not fear. But the others saw only weakness. Colonel Webb took a step closer, the air thickening around him. "What the hell are you even doing here?" he demanded. Sarah swallowed hard. I work in admin, sir, temporary staff." The colonel's lip curled. "Admin? Then stick to your desk. Don't come near officers' events again, you understand." She nodded quickly, murmuring apologies that sounded smaller with every word. He turned away, muttering something about standards slipping. The tension eased just enough for people to start whispering again. Wine was dabbed up, laughter resumed, and the music tried to restart what dignity remained of the night. But Sarah didn't move. She just stood there frozen, cheeks burning, the sting of humiliation crawling up her neck. Somewhere deep inside something shifted. Not anger, not yet, something colder. Calculation. She set the empty wine bottle back on the tray with her good hand, and quietly stepped away from the colonel's table. 40 minutes earlier, she'd entered through the service entrance. No escort, no smile from the guards, just a quick flash of a temporary badge and a murmured, "Administrative hire clearance approved." Nobody had cared enough to look closer. The ballroom was magnificent in that hollow way only military luxury can be. Chandeliers sparkling like medals, portraits of past generals watching over polished marble floors, the faint scent of leather and gun oil lingering under perfume. Sarah had hugged a manila folder against her chest as she slipped to the far corner of the room. She wasn't supposed to stand out, and she didn't. That was the point. "Is this seat taken?" she'd asked quietly, gesturing to an empty chair near the kitchen door. A young officer had looked up, Lieutenant Elena Rodriguez, early 30s, kind eyes, uniform spotless. "No, please sit," she said with a welcoming smile. Sarah had nodded, grateful. "Thank you, I'm Sarah, new in admin." "Welcome to the circus," Alina had joked softly. "Ignore the politics, they're worse than boot camp." Sarah had smiled faintly, but her eyes kept moving, scanning, counting. 3 exits, kitchen access, emergency door behind the stage. 14 cameras, 2 disabled for maintenance. Head table, 8 officers, web at center. Every detail recorded, not consciously, not obviously, but with the precision of habit, the kind that doesn't forget. The laughter from the main table drew her attention next. Webb's wife, Madison Brooks, sat draped in red silk, surrounded by a cluster of officers' spouses. Every inch of her glittered, diamonds, gold, smugness. She caught sight of Sarah and leaned toward her friends. "Ladies," she whispered, loud enough to be heard, "looks like we have a new charity case, straight from the clearance rack at Goodwill." The table erupted in soft, cruel laughter. Sarah kept her eyes on her folder. Her husband had taught her once, you can survive anything if you know when not to react. She pretended to study personnel sheets that weren't real. Inside the folder were encrypted documents, names, transfer schedules, coded references. She was supposed to blend in. Tonight was supposed to be quiet reconnaissance. Then the colonel had called for more wine. And fate, unforgiving, perfect fate, had made her the one to bring it. Now, after the glass had shattered and her humiliation played out before 200 strangers, the night's mission was compromised, or maybe altered. Lieutenant Alina found her near the serving counter, whispering urgently. "Don't let them get to you," she said. "They're drunk and entitled." Sarah smiled weakly. "I've been through worse." Alina's brow furrowed. "That hand, what happened?" "Accident," Sarah said softly. "A long time ago." She didn't add that 17 bones had been broken in that hand, that it had taken 6 surgeries just to hold a pen again, that the painkillers in her bag were government tissue, reserved for veterans no one remembered existed. She adjusted her scarf, gray, unremarkable. It hid faint scars trailing up her neck, but also something else inked beneath them. Jake Wilson watched her from his corner, uneasy. He'd seen too many faces to mistake that look, distance mixed with alertness. The kind soldiers wear when pretending to be civilians. Whoever she wasn't just admin. He caught sight of Colonel Webb refilling his glass, still muttering insults under his breath, his wife whispering poison into his ear. Jake knew the type. Men who'd never faced real war but wore it like a brand. He turned back to Sarah and froze. She was studying Webb, not glaring, not emotional, just watching. The way an analyst watches a suspect, the way a predator watches movement in tall grass. He didn't know it yet, but everything she did from this point, every gesture, every silent glance, was part of something far larger than anyone in that ballroom could imagine. "Let's see if she even belongs here," someone said loudly from Webb's table. It was Captain Derek Chen, too handsome, too confident, the kind of man who thought cruelty was charm. "If she's working on base, she should know some basic protocols. Tell me, what's the NATO phonetic first?" Sarah blinked, caught off guard. "Sierra," she answered quietly. "My husband taught me." The room tittered. Madison Brooks pounced. "Let me guess, he couldn't handle the pressure, drank himself to death." Sarah's lips parted, but no words came. Her left hand gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "He was killed in action," she whispered. The laughter faltered, but only for a moment. "Convenient story," someone muttered. Jake exhaled slowly. He wanted to stand up, but he didn't. Not yet. Something told him to wait. Major Lance Morrison rose next, his voice dripping with false amusement. "You know what I think? I think that hand works just fine. You're just looking for sympathy." Sarah said nothing. "Prove it," Madison said sweetly. "Take off the bandages." A ripple moved through the crowd. The cruelty had shifted tone. It wasn't mocking anymore. It was hungry. Sarah hesitated. Her pulse thudded once in her throat. If she refused, they'd win. If she complied, everything might unravel. But then again, maybe it was time to start unraveling. She nodded slowly, if that's what it takes. Jake straightened in his chair. Don't, he thought silently, don't give them that. Her left hand trembled as she worked the clips loose, the wrappings coming undone inch by inch. The first layer revealed old scars, deep, uneven, jagged lines twisting over her skin. Gasps filled the air. By the second layer, the truth was undeniable. The bones had been shattered and healed wrong, fingers slightly bent, tendons scarred over. Not the neat precision of surgery. This was torture, deliberate clinical cruelty. Someone whispered, "Dear God." Sarah's expression didn't change. Satisfied, she asked softly. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Webb sneered, forcing authority back into his tone. So you have a messed up hand. Doesn't excuse incompetence. Infiltrate, she repeated when he accused her again. Her voice dropped, calm, steady. Interesting choice of word, Colonel. Jake saw it then, the flicker in her eyes. Something had shifted. And then Webb's encrypted phone buzzed. He frowned, reading the message. His jaw tightened, his face paling slightly before hardening again. He shoved the phone back into his pocket, but the damage was done. Across the room, Sarah's own bag vibrated once. A faint, silent signal. She didn't look, but Jake caught the movement of her eyes just for a second, enough to confirm that the two events were connected. He exhaled sharply. "What the hell are you, lady?" he murmured under his breath. Sarah Mitchell, the trembling widow, the nobody from admin, wasn't trembling anymore. Her posture had changed. Her eyes sharpened. Every fiber of her body hummed with quiet control. The facade was cracking. But no one else saw it. Not yet. That night before the last toast was raised and before every man in that room would question everything he'd ever believed about her, Sarah Mitchell, quiet, gray, unassuming, looked across the table at Colonel Webb and whispered, "You want me to serve? Fine. Let's see who's really being served tonight." And somewhere deep in the machinery of military intelligence, a secure satellite network blinked alive. Target confirmed. Proceed with identification. And the hunt began. Why didn't she walk away? That was what most of them wondered later. Why stay after the humiliation, after the insults, the laughter, the cruelty? But Sarah Mitchell didn't walk away. She stayed. She picked up a tray with her one good hand, and she began to serve. Because sometimes, the only way to take back control is to let the world underestimate you. The ballroom had gone quiet again, that uneasy calm after a spectacle. Forks clinked against china. Soft jazz from the quartet tried to drown the memory of what had just happened, but the air still buzzed with something sharp and uncomfortable. Sarah moved through the tables, head bowed, pouring wine, refilling glasses, clearing plates. Her right hand, the one wrapped in scars, hung motionless at her side like a secret she couldn't hide anymore. Her left did all the work. "Look at her shake," Madison Brooks whispered to her friends. "Pathetic." "Probably drunk," someone added. "Or high on painkillers," another guessed. Their laughter was quieter now, but it was still there, mean and brittle, feeding on itself. Yet Sarah didn't react. Her movements were steady, mechanical. Every gesture calculated. Every pause deliberate. From his corner table, Jake Wilson watched. He'd seen her type before, people who'd learned how to hide trauma behind silence. But this was different. The precision in her movements wasn't submission. It was restraint. Controlled, measured, surgical. He watched her pour a glass of wine with flawless accuracy despite her trembling fingers. She didn't spill a drop. Not one. She was memorizing faces, logging names. He could almost see the invisible gears turning behind her calm eyes. And Webb was growing restless. He tried to reassert control by making her serve, by turning her into entertainment for the others. But every time she approached his table, he flinched slightly, though he couldn't have said why. Something about her proximity set his instincts on edge. The predator in him recognized something, the faint scent of danger beneath submission. 20 minutes passed. Sarah moved from table to table like a ghost in gray, but she wasn't serving dinner anymore. She was collecting intelligence. Her eyes flicked toward Webb's phone each time it vibrated, catching the way he angled the screen away. She noted the names he whispered to his subordinates: Major Morrison, Captain Chen, Lieutenant Martinez, the same three who'd joined in humiliating her. Each one would soon be on a list. At one point, as she leaned over to refill a glass, she caught fragments of conversation. Transfer records, Langley oversight, next phase, secure accounts, Caymans. The words were quick-coded, harmless to anyone else, but to Sarah they burned like acid. She knew the pattern: financial laundering, operational funding, hidden intelligence channels. It was confirmation. She was in the right place. Then Derek Chen decided to test her again. As Sarah leaned in to clear his plate, he gave his glass a playful shove, accidentally knocking her tray from her hand. The porcelain shattered against the floor, sharp and sudden like gunfire. A few veterans flinched out of instinct. Oops, Derek smirked, Butterfingers. The laughter came back, nervous at first, then louder as people joined in, trying to mask their discomfort. Clean it up, Webb ordered coldly. On your knees where you belong. A ripple moved through the room. Someone whispered, "This is going too far," but no one intervened. Sarah knelt. The skirt pooled around her like smoke, the gray fabric brushing marble as she gathered broken shards one by one. Her movements were slow, deliberate. She didn't look up. The humiliation should have broken her, but somehow it didn't. If anything, she looked calmer than before. Jake felt his throat tighten. He wanted to move, to stop it, to end this sick display, but something about the way she knelt stopped him cold. She wasn't defeated. She was patient. That patience scared him, because he recognized it. It was the kind soldiers learned when waiting for the right shot. Then it happened. Major Morrison, too close, too careless, stepped forward, his heavy boot pressing down on Sarah's injured hand. The sound she made wasn't a scream. It was something lower, deeper, a growl torn from somewhere ancient and animal. The room froze. Sarah's body moved before her mind could stop it. She rolled away from the pain, came up in a crouch, fluid, fast, efficient. Every eye in the ballroom locked on her as instinct replaced fear. Her posture wasn't that of a broken woman. It was a stance every combat veteran recognized immediately: centered, defensive, lethal. Her eyes met Morrison's, not with rage, with calculation. For 2 seconds the mask slipped. Then she caught herself, shoulders slumping, gaze dropping. The illusion returned. The gray woman, the nobody. But those 2 seconds were enough. Jake Wilson sat forward, heart pounding. "Holy hell," he whispered. He'd seen that stance before: Kandahar, 2015. Close quarters training, level 6 operators only. That's not admin training, he thought. That's black ops. "Get up," Webb roared, his voice cracking like a whip. "You're done here, out of my sight before I have you arrested." Sarah rose slowly, her injured hand cradled against her chest. For the first time all evening, she looked him in the eye. "Arrested for what exactly?" she asked softly. "For being where you don't belong, for lying about who you are, for spilling wine," she interrupted, "for being poor, for having a damaged hand." Her tone wasn't loud, but it carried through the ballroom. People shifted in their seats, glancing uneasily at one another. "Which of those is a crime, Colonel?" she asked. Webb's face turned crimson. "You little—" He lunged, grabbing her by the collar and lifting her off her feet. The cheap fabric strained, buttons snapping under his grip. The crowd gasped, half rising from their chairs. Madison Brooks rushed forward, shrieking, "Marcus, stop! Don't let her play the victim again." But the damage was already done. As Webb shook her, Madison's diamond-studded nails snagged on the back of Sarah's shirt. The fabric tore with a sound that silenced the room. What lay beneath stopped everything. For a second, no one breathed. Under the harsh light of the chandeliers, across the pale scars and muscle of her upper back, a tattoo blazed black against skin. A raven perched on a skull, its single red eye glinting like a drop of blood. 7 stars circled the design, each with cracks running through them like shrapnel fractures. Below them, in perfect military lettering, Raven 7, 2009-2024. And beneath that, a Latin phrase carved into her flesh as much as inked upon it. Mortui vivos docent. The dead teach the living. Jake Wilson's glass hit the table. Holy Mother of, his voice trailed off. Ghost Raven. The words rippled through the room like a shockwave. Every intelligence officer, every operator, every soldier who'd ever heard whispers of covert legends went pale. Raven 7. The one who'd survived 7 black sites. The one who extracted agents from missions that didn't exist. The one reported killed in action 3 years ago. Sarah Mitchell. Dead, buried, forgotten. Alive. Colonel Webb stumbled back, releasing her as if burned. His complexion drained of color, his breath caught halfway between rage and horror. Around him, officers whispered, "It can't be, she's dead. That's impossible." Sarah straightened her torn shirt, her composure eerie in its calm. "Hello, Marcus," she said. And the way she said his name, flat, quiet, unhurried, carried the promise of judgment. "You're supposed to be dead," Webb stammered. "I saw the report." "You did," she interrupted. "You probably signed it." Her tone wasn't angry, it was colder. 3 years, Damascus. You remember that night. He froze. Behind her, someone whispered, "Damascus, Operation Nightfall." Sarah took a step closer. 72 hours, she said. "That's how long they had me. That's how long I held out while they broke every finger in this hand." She raised her right hand, the one he'd mocked, and the light caught the scars again. The murmurs in the crowd turned to stunned silence. "But you want to know what hurt worse, Marcus," she continued softly. "Knowing someone on the inside sold us out." Jake's breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. "You can't prove anything," Webb snapped, his voice shaking now. "Oh, I can," she said, reaching into her bag with her left hand. "I've spent 3 years doing exactly that." From the worn canvas bag, she produced a small metallic object, a USB drive. "Financial records," she said evenly. "Transfers totaling $2 million to accounts under your name, messages between you and hostile contacts, encrypted routes that match every compromised op in Syria." Webb's face twisted, veins standing out in his neck. "You're lying, this is a setup." But the crowd wasn't with him anymore. The spell had broken. His wife backed away slowly, eyes wide. Other officers rose from their seats. Some reached for their phones. Others reached for moral ground. Jake Wilson stood, his voice rough. "She's not lying." He remembered the extraction in Kandahar, the near-impossible rescue, the woman who'd refused evacuation until every civilian was safe. He never seen her face then, but he remembered her radio handle, Raven. "Holy hell," he whispered again, more to himself than anyone. "It's really her." General Barrett entered then, flanked by 2 military intelligence officers. His face was grim, his eyes knowing. "Agent Mitchell," he said, his tone formal. "We've been waiting for this confirmation." Gasps, shock. Webb's composure collapsed completely. Sarah didn't move. "I'm not an agent anymore," she said quietly, "just a widow looking for closure." But her eyes told a different story. "Marcus Webb," General Barrett announced, "you're under arrest for treason, espionage, and the sale of classified intelligence to hostile entities." The room erupted in chaos. Webb shouted denials, his wife screamed, officers surged forward, but the sound that cut through it all wasn't a command or a cry. It was the quiet click of Sarah's damaged hand as she gripped Webb's wrist, firm, unyielding. He gasped in pain. She leaned in close, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "You remember my husband, Marcus, Lieutenant Commander David Mitchell. You sold him out. You made me watch him die." She released his wrist, stepping back as SEALs flooded the room from hidden doors, weapons ready, movements silent and efficient. The guests backed away, eyes wide, terrified. The glamour of their world had shattered like glass, and at its center stood the woman they'd mocked, her torn shirt revealing the ink of every nightmare she'd survived. Jake watched her as Webb was handcuffed and dragged away. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood there still, exhausted, hollow. And for a moment he understood. This wasn't revenge. It was justice delivered by someone who'd already been to hell and come back carrying the evidence. Later, as the SEALs cleared the scene, Sarah's gaze found Webb one last time. "It wasn't personal," he spat, desperation bleeding into his voice. "It was just money." "I know," she said quietly. "That's what makes it worse." The ballroom fell silent again. For the first time that night, nobody looked away from her. And in that stillness, where chandeliers flickered and uniforms trembled, a single truth settled like ash. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What happens after a secret dies? Does the world get quieter or louder? In the aftermath of Fort Bragg's grandest dinner, there was no music, no laughter, no chatter, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the sound of boots moving across marble floors. 200 officers stood in silence as the ghosts they'd created came to life before them. Sarah Mitchell didn't move for a long time. The woman they'd mocked, humiliated and dismissed, now stood in the same torn gray shirt, the raven tattoo across her back gleaming like a battle flag. Around her, the air was thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. General Barrett's voice carried through the room, calm but firm. "Secure the scene." A dozen SEALs moved in perfect coordination. Webb was restrained first, then his inner circle Morrison, Chen, Martinez. Each one looked stunned, caught between disbelief and fear. Their medals glittered under the harsh light, cheap as costume jewelry now. Madison Brooks stood frozen near the head table, her perfect hair undone, lipstick smudged. Her husband, her pride, was being read his rights in front of the people he'd ruled with cruelty. "You can't do this," she whispered, but no one listened. Sarah finally exhaled. Her injured hand ached, every nerve, every old fracture throbbing, but she didn't flinch. She just looked at Webb as the SEALs pulled him upright. "You remember my husband, Marcus," she said softly. "You made me watch them kill him." He turned, eyes wild. "You don't know what you're talking about." 72 hours, she interrupted. "That's how long I held out before I broke, before I stopped believing rescue was coming." Her voice didn't tremble. It didn't need to. Every syllable cut clean through the silence. Then she said his name again. "David Mitchell." For the first time since his arrest, Webb's expression faltered. A flicker of guilt, of something human, gone as quickly as it came. Jake Wilson swallowed hard. The name hit him like a gut punch. Lieutenant Commander David Mitchell. He remembered the after-action reports. A decorated Navy officer killed in Syria, body unrecovered. The mission classified under Operation Nightfall. Jake had never connected the name before, until now. And suddenly, all the little inconsistencies about Sarah, the scars, the knowledge, the stance clicked into place. She wasn't some grieving widow. She was Raven 7. General Barrett approached cautiously. He was an old soldier, gray at the temples, his medals dull compared to Webb's, but his eyes still sharp. He'd been in this game long enough to recognize truth when it stared him in the face. "Agent Mitchell," he said formally, his tone steady. "I believe you have evidence to present." Sarah didn't take her eyes off Webb. "I do." She handed the USB drive to Barrett, her bandaged hand trembling slightly. "Financial records. 2 million in deposits tied to Colonel Webb's accounts, each one linked to the night of an operational failure." Barrett nodded. "And communications." Sarah's lips thinned. "Encrypted messages between Webb and foreign intelligence handlers. They're in there too." The general motioned to one of his aides. "Get this to the secure team immediately." The aide hurried off, clutching the tiny device like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Marcus Webb," Barrett continued, turning to the disgraced colonel, "you are under arrest for treason, espionage, and conspiracy to commit murder. You'll be transferred to a secure facility pending interrogation." Webb tried to speak, but no words came. His throat worked uselessly. He looked small now, shrinking in his once proud uniform. Sarah's expression didn't change. "You sold 8 people for money," she said quietly. "My husband was one of them. They made me watch. They thought it would break me." Her gaze sharpened. "It did, but not the way they expected." When the SEALs began to move Webb out, chaos erupted again. People whispered, gasped, fumbled for their phones. Some recorded. Some cried. Others simply stood in disbelief. Madison Brooks snapped out of her trance and screamed, "This is insane. My husband's a patriot." No one answered her. She turned desperately to the other wives, to the officers she'd once commanded with charm and cruelty. Tell them he's innocent." But no one spoke. Some of them stepped away, creating physical distance like treason was contagious. Others looked down, ashamed of the laughter they'd joined in hours earlier. Madison's face crumpled. "You don't understand, he did this for us." Sarah looked at her for a long, cold moment. "No," she said softly, "he did it for himself." And then she turned away. Jake Wilson finally approached. His heart still pounded, the way it used to before breaching a door in hostile territory. "I knew I recognized that stance," he said quietly, half in awe. "Kandahar, 2015, the embassy extraction." Sarah glanced at him, her eyes tired but sharp. "Delta Force," she said. "You were on the QRF team." Jake nodded slowly. "We thought you were a full-fire team. The report said one defender held off 200 Taliban fighters." Sarah gave a small, dry smile. "I got better." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Guess you did." Their exchange was brief, wordless understanding passing between them. The kind only soldiers share when they've both lived through something no one else could comprehend. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Elena Rodriguez, the young officer who tried to help Sarah earlier, came forward carrying a medical kit. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice was steady. "Your hand," she said. "Let me help." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. The adrenaline had worn off. Now every pulse of blood through her arm was agony. She sat down, letting Elena work. As the lieutenant cleaned the torn skin and wrapped it in fresh gauze, she whispered, "Those scars, I've only read about wounds like that. Spiral fractures, impact breaks. That wasn't an accident, was it?" Sarah looked away. "No, it was." Elena's voice softened. "How did you survive that kind of pain?" "By remembering why I needed to," Sarah said quietly. "Every time they broke another bone, I thought about David, about the people who died, about the truth that needed to come out." She paused, then added, "Pain is just another kind of intelligence. It tells you what your enemy fears." Across the room, General Barrett conferred with his officers. More soldiers arrived, military police, intelligence agents, command staff. The ballroom that had been a party hours ago now looked like a war zone of secrets exposed. Jake leaned closer to Sarah. "You planned this from the start, didn't you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she flexed her bandaged hand and stared at the wreckage around her. The spilled wine, the shattered glass, the faces that couldn't meet her gaze. I didn't plan the wine, she said finally, but I planned everything after. She nodded toward Webb's table. I needed confirmation, a reaction, proof he was still connected. The wine just sped things up. Jake exhaled slowly. 3 years you hunted him. 3 years pretending to be nobody, she said. A ghost in gray. He looked at her torn shirt, the faint shimmer of the raven tattoo beneath. You were never nobody. She almost smiled. Tell that to them. The officers who'd mocked her earlier stood in clusters now, whispering furiously. Some argued. Some wept. A few looked like they wanted to apologize, but no one dared approach. Sarah ignored them all. Her focus was on General Barrett, who was studying a tablet now, data from the USB drive already decrypted by the on-site techs. His expression was grim. This goes deep, he muttered to his aide. Contractors, diplomatic staff, maybe higher. He turned toward Sarah, Agent Mitchell. I'm not an agent anymore, she cut in softly. Not since Damascus. Barrett inclined his head slightly, a gesture of respect. Miss Mitchell, then, what you've uncovered tonight, it's bigger than Webb. If those financial roots are real, this could tie into multiple operations. Sarah met his eyes. It does. He frowned. You know more. I know enough to be afraid of what comes next. From the far end of the room, a new voice spoke, a woman's voice, low but commanding. Then it's a good thing you're not alone anymore. Everyone turned. A figure strode in through the double doors, civilian clothes, gray hair tied back, posture sharp as a drawn blade. 2 federal agents followed close behind. General Barrett stiffened. Director Harrison. The woman nodded once. When one of our presumed dead operatives resurfaces with evidence of the biggest intelligence breach since Ames, I tend to take it personally. Her gaze found Sarah almost immediately. Hello, Raven, she said. Sarah exhaled, the name sounding strange after 3 years of hiding it. Hello, Director. I read your file, Harrison said quietly. What they did to you, I'm sorry. You should be, Sarah replied. You left me there. Harrison didn't flinch. You weren't supposed to survive. Neither were the others, Sarah said, but they didn't get that chance. The silence between them was heavy, layered with years of betrayal and necessity. 2 women shaped by the same broken machine. Harrison finally said, I'm here to make you an offer. I'm not coming back, Sarah said immediately. I did this for David, not for you. I know, Harrison replied, but this isn't field work, it's something else. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. We're creating a new division, internal review, operational security, designed to identify and eliminate insider threats. Sarah's eyes narrowed. You want me to hunt moles? Harrison nodded. No one's better equipped. You spent 3 years doing exactly that, with no resources, no backup, while pretending to be a grieving widow. Sarah hesitated. Around her, officers watched, pretending not to listen. The room held its breath again. There are others, aren't there? Sarah asked quietly. Other leaks. Harrison's expression darkened. We think so. Webb wasn't working alone. Sarah looked down at her scarred hand, flexing it slowly. Then you'll need someone who's already learned how to live with broken things. Jake stepped forward before he could stop himself. If she says yes, give her what she asks for. Harrison turned a cool gaze on him. And you are? Jake Wilson, Delta Force, retired. I was there the night she became a legend. For a moment, something almost like respect flickered in Harrison's eyes. Noted. Sarah looked at Jake, then at the crowd. The same faces that had sneered at her hours ago now watching her like she was something out of myth. She took a slow breath. I have conditions, she said finally. Harrison nodded. Name them. Full access to files related to the Syria operation, authority to requisition whatever I need, and, she hesitated, glancing at her bandaged hand, experimental medical treatment, full coverage. Done, Harrison said without hesitation. Also, Sarah added, her gaze cutting toward Madison Brooks, who sat collapsed in a chair. Counseling for the families of those convicted. They didn't choose this, but they'll suffer for it. Harrison blinked, surprised. That can be arranged. Sarah nodded once. Good. The director's voice softened. Anything else? Yes, Sarah said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded American flag, wrapped in protective plastic. My husband's flag. It goes on the wall at Langley with the others who died because of betrayal. Harrison's throat tightened. I'll see to it personally. Sarah took the glass of bourbon Jake handed her, raised it slightly, and spoke to the room. To the dead who teach the living, she said quietly, may we be worthy of their lessons. No one dared look away. As the glass touched her lips, the woman they'd mocked for spilling wine stood reborn in the heart of the empire that had once discarded her. The raven had risen from its grave, and its wings were only beginning to spread. How do you come back from the dead? When the world never wanted you to return. The black SUV slid away from Fort Bragg like a shadow retreating from light. No police escort, no flashing lights, just 4 people in silence, carrying secrets heavier than coffins. Sarah Mitchell sat in the back seat, her body aching, her mind sharper than ever. The torn gray shirt clung to her skin, still smelling faintly of spilled wine and cordite from memories that never faded. Her right hand, bound in fresh gauze, rested in her lap, an old wound that had never really healed. Outside, pine trees blurred into streaks of darkness. North Carolina's highways rolled past like ribbons through nowhere. Inside, no one spoke. Director Harrison sat in the passenger seat, her tablet glowing blue against the night. Every few seconds she tapped the screen, sending encrypted orders that would ripple through half a dozen agencies by morning. General Barrett rode beside Sarah, stone-faced, his hat in his lap. Across from her sat Jake Wilson, silent, studying her profile in the dim cabin light. She looked like she hadn't slept in years. Medical teams standing by, Harrison said without turning. They'll want to do a full evaluation. The nerve damage, the... Later, Sarah interrupted softly. First, the files. Harrison's eyes flicked to her reflection in the window. You don't waste time. I've already wasted 3 years, Sarah said. Jake leaned forward slightly. Where are we going? Harrison answered without looking back. A secure facility. It doesn't appear on any map. Blacksite, he asked. Something like that. Sarah almost smiled. Funny, I used to work in places like that. Barrett's deep voice broke the silence. You shouldn't have had to. Sarah turned to him. No one should, but somebody always does. The SUV left the main road, turning onto a narrow asphalt strip flanked by pine and chain link. Motion sensors blinked red as they passed. A second later, steel gates parted soundlessly. Beyond them lay concrete, floodlights, and the hum of machines that never slept. Welcome to Site Epsilon, Harrison said. Internal Review Headquarters, built under Homeland's nose and funded off-ledger. The only people who know it exists are in this car. Jake let out a low whistle. You weren't kidding. The vehicle descended a sloped ramp into the underground complex. Bright white light replaced the darkness outside. Technicians in civilian clothes paused mid-stride when they saw who stepped out first. Raven 7. She ignored their stares, moving through security with her left hand pressed to the scanner. The guards didn't question her identity. The tattoo on her back had already circulated through internal networks. Half of Langley thought she was a ghost. The other half was terrified she was. They reached a glass-walled briefing room lined with digital screens. Harrison motioned to a chair, but Sarah remained standing. Pull up Webb's accounts, she ordered. A technician hesitated, looking at Harrison. She nodded once. The screens filled with lines of code, transaction routes, offshore shells, encrypted transfers. Red markers bled across the map, Cayman Islands, Cyprus, Zurich, Doha. Sarah's eyes tracked each one. 17 accounts, she murmured, laundered through contractors, defense subcontractors, and fake research initiatives. Classic internal bleed pattern. Barrett frowned, meaning. Meaning Webb was small-time, she said. A collector, not a creator. Someone fed him the intel, handled the transfers, scrubbed the records. Jake crossed his arms. So the banker wasn't just a nickname. Sarah shook her head. No, it's a hierarchy. 6 subagents feeding a primary handler. Webb was Banker 6. The one who sold me out was Banker 1. The words hung in the air like gunmetal. Harrison's eyes narrowed. How do you know that? During interrogation, Sarah said quietly, they asked questions only someone with top-tier clearance could have supplied. My medical file, my psychological profile. They even knew about Operation Ghost Light. Barrett's head jerked up. That operation doesn't exist. Sarah's voice didn't change. Tell that to the people who died for it. For a moment, no one spoke. The hum of the servers filled the silence. Harrison straightened. All right, let's start where you left off. You said Webb's data traces to a higher node. Show us. Sarah stepped closer to the table, her shadow stretching across the screen. Her fingers danced over the interface, typing one-handed with deliberate precision. Lines of data realigned, patterns emerging from chaos. Every few keystrokes, her breath hitched, pain radiating from her ruined hand, but she didn't stop. Here, she said finally, notice the date clusters. Every major leak Webb profited from corresponds with financial fluctuations in these defense oversight accounts. Too small to trigger audits, too consistent to be random. Harrison studied the screen, a mole inside financial control. Sarah nodded. Someone who authorizes mission budgets, adjusts expense codes. They hide payments by padding costs on ghost operations, funds that technically exist, missions that don't. Jake muttered, so they're financing betrayal with government money. Exactly, Sarah said, and Webb was just a delivery system. Barrett rubbed his forehead. You realize what you're suggesting, right? That someone with director-level access has been selling classified data for nearly a decade. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. I'm not suggesting, I'm confirming. Harrison turned to her. Do you have a name? Sarah hesitated. Not yet, just patterns, but I'm close. Define close. I know where Banker 1 hides their money. I just need confirmation. And when you get it, Harrison asked. Sarah looked at the director, the woman who'd signed the order that sent her to Damascus. Then I finish what I started. Hours blurred. The debrief stretched past midnight, into the gray hours where exhaustion and adrenaline fused into something dangerous. Analysts rotated in and out, dumping terabytes of decrypted files across screens. The walls flickered with faces, account numbers, maps of operations that officially never existed. Jake stayed close, mostly silent. He wasn't intelligence, but he understood predators, and Sarah Mitchell was hunting one. At 3:17 a.m., she leaned back, flexing her injured hand until the knuckles popped. Pause data feed. The room froze. Harrison looked up. You found something. Sarah zoomed in on a small node, almost invisible among the chaos, a signature embedded in multiple authorizations, a simple digital stamp. DL04. Barrett frowned. Could be a contractor ID. Sarah shook her head. Number DL isn't a company code. It's personal initials. Whoever Banker 1 is, they've been sloppy. Harrison's eyes darkened. You can trace it. I can try, but I'll need full clearance. You already have it, Harrison said. Sarah nodded once. Then let's see who's been selling ghosts. The system ran for 15 minutes before freezing on a single image. A middle-aged man in a tailored suit, eyes bright, smile practiced. Daniel Laird, Deputy Director of Budgetary Oversight, Department of Defense. Jake blinked. That's him. Sarah studied the photo without emotion. Banker 1. Barrett swore under his breath. Jesus, he's got oversight on nearly every joint operation we've run since 2016. Harrison's expression hardened, and he's untouchable without concrete evidence. Then we get it, Sarah said simply. She walked to the observation window, staring out at the rows of humming servers beyond. For a long moment, the only sound was machinery breathing. Jake approached quietly. You ever rest? She gave a small laugh that was an amusement. I tried once. It didn't take. Why keep going? He asked. You've already got justice. Webb's done. Sarah's gaze stayed on the glass. Because Webb wasn't the disease, he was just a symptom. Banker 1 is the infection, and infection spread. Jake nodded slowly. And you're the cure. She turned toward him. No, I'm the reminder of what happens when the system forgets its own. At 4 a.m., Harrison dismissed the others. Only the 3 of them remained, Harrison, Barrett, and Sarah. Sleep, Harrison ordered. You're no good to anyone dead on your feet. I've been dead before, Sarah said. It's overrated. Barrett gave a quiet chuckle. You always this pleasant. Only when I'm in pain. She tried to flex her hand again but stopped halfway. The tremor ran up her arm like an electric shock. She hit it quickly, but Jake saw. Pain meds? He asked. She shook her head. They dull my focus. Then what keeps you going? Memory, she said softly. And the fact that every time I close my eyes, I still hear David's voice. Her expression hardened. He told me once that truth is like gravity. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually it drags everything back down. Harrison studied her for a long time. He was right. By dawn, the complex hummed with new urgency. Arrest teams mobilized across 3 states. Secure servers began pulling data from Laird's office before he could scrub it. Every movement was calculated, precise, silent. Sarah watched from the control room as coordinates lit up red. Once we confirm, Harrison said, we'll move in. Sarah nodded, eyes never leaving the screen. No warning, no negotiation. You want to be there, Harrison said. I need to be there, Sarah corrected. He financed the betrayal that killed 8 people. He bought their deaths with signatures and wire transfers. Barrett looked uneasy. This isn't vengeance, Mitchell. No, she said, this is accountability. Later in the medical wing, as doctors checked her vitals and logged her nerve response, she sat motionless. The pain was constant, a steady burn that grounded her more than the sedatives ever could. One of the younger medics, a corporal barely old enough to shave, hesitated as he wrapped her hand. Ma'am, he said nervously, I just wanted to say what you did last night. It was incredible. Sarah looked at him. No, it was necessary. He swallowed, nodding. Still, it takes courage. Courage, she murmured, isn't the absence of fear. It's doing your job while terrified. He smiled awkwardly and left her to rest, but she didn't. She couldn't. The raven on her back ached, phantom pain under ink. 7 stars, 7 missions survived. The 8th was still waiting. Hours later, Harrison returned. We have confirmation, she said quietly. Laird's prepping for an emergency flight to Geneva. Sarah stood, already reaching for her jacket. Then we're out of time. Harrison asked. You think I've come this far to sit behind glass? Jake appeared at the doorway, fully geared, weapon holstered but visible. She's not wrong. Harrison sighed. You realize this isn't sanctioned. Sarah met her gaze. Neither was Damascus. That ended the discussion. By nightfall, another SUV waited at the hangar. The engines of a gray transport plane rumbled in the background, floodlights cutting through mist. A storm gathered over the Carolina pines, thunder growling like something ancient. Sarah climbed into the vehicle, settling beside Jake. Harrison leaned in through the door. Get him alive, the director said. We need his testimony. Sarah's eyes were cold. "I'll do what's necessary." Harrison hesitated, then handed her a file. For what it's worth, David would have been proud. Sarah stared at the folder for a long moment before tucking it away. He'd have told me to finish the mission. The SUV door shut. The convoy rolled into the rain. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the horizon in brief flashes. Inside, Sarah's reflection shimmered against the window. Bandaged hand, gray clothes, eyes like the edge of a blade. Jake glanced at her. "You ready for this?" She didn't look away from the storm. "I was ready 3 years ago." He nodded. "Then let's end it." The thunder swallowed his words. And somewhere deep inside that storm, justice waited to be found again, paid for in truth, blood, and the steady pulse of a woman who refused to stay buried. Because sometimes the dead don't rest. They hunt. Why do the guilty always run toward airports? Maybe because the sky still looks like freedom. Rain blurred the runway lights into white streaks as the convoy reached the airfield. 2 SUVs rolled to a halt beside a C-17 transport jet disguised under civilian markings. Its engines whined, ready to carry the most dangerous secret in Washington halfway across the world. Sarah Mitchell stepped out into the downpour, gray jacket already soaked through. The cold didn't bother her. She'd been colder, in caves, in basements, in rooms that stank of betrayal. Jake Wilson joined her, his gear slick with rain, his face unreadable under the low light. "Geneva in 7 hours," he said. "Plenty of time to think," she answered. He smiled faintly. "You're not going to sleep, are you?" "Not tonight." The thunder swallowed their words. Inside the jet, the cabin hummed with low light and mission chatter. 2 analysts worked behind screens, relaying satellite feeds. Harrison's encrypted orders appeared on screen every hour. No press, no local law enforcement, no diplomatic leaks. Laird's private jet had filed a medical emergency flight plan from D.C. to Switzerland. He'd be wheels up within 90 minutes. Sarah studied his photo again. The same polished smile, the same self-satisfied calm she'd seen in every man who thought paperwork couldn't kill people. Jake noticed her stare. "What'll you say to him when you find him?" "I haven't decided yet," she said quietly. "Words were never my weapon." At 02:37 UTC, the C-17 leveled above storm clouds. Lightning flashed outside the windows like camera bulbs on a crime scene. The analysts handed her a tablet. "Live feed from Andrews," one said. "His plane's taxiing." Sarah zoomed in on the small jet through rain-blurred surveillance footage. Laird appeared at the stairs, briefcase in one hand, umbrella in the other. Around him, 2 men in civilian suits, his security detail, scanned the tarmac. "He's confident," Jake muttered. "He's predictable," Sarah replied. The feed switched to an infrared overlay, engine heat, movement trails, wind direction. "Do we have interception clearance?" Jake asked. "Negative," the analyst said. "If we intervene on U.S. soil, it's political suicide." Sarah's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Then we make sure he doesn't land." 3 hours later, over the Atlantic, the hum of the jet changed pitch. One of the analysts looked up, confused. "Ma'am, you might want to see this." A second aircraft appeared on radar, smaller, faster. It was Laird's jet. It was something else. Jake leaned forward. "That's an escort." "No," Sarah said. "That's a cleanup." The analyst's face paled. "You think?" "He's not running from us," Sarah said. "He's being erased." Harrison's voice crackled through the comms. "Mitchell, we've confirmed a foreign tail on Laird's aircraft. Call sign unknown. You're to intercept now." "Copy," Sarah said. "Vectoring course." She glanced at Jake. "Looks like we're not chasing a traitor anymore." Jake grabbed his headset. "We're racing his killers." The Atlantic stretched endless beneath them, moonlight breaking over clouds. The second plane, sleek, Unmarked closed in on Laird's jet from above. Within minutes, radar lit with a bloom of static. EMP burst, the analyst said. Short range, that's sabotage. Sarah's pulse spiked. They're going to crash him. The comms erupted with alarms. Laird's transponder vanished. Seconds later, a red dot flared where the Gulf Stream cut through the darkness. Impact confirmed, the analyst said softly. Coordinates 54.19 north, 31.4 west. No survivors. Jake swore under his breath. So much for testimony. But Sarah didn't move. Her eyes stayed fixed on the empty radar, watching as the signal faded completely. She whispered almost to herself, "That's not how he dies." The analysts exchanged uneasy glances. "Ma'am." "Banker 1 doesn't get erased that cleanly," Sarah said. "Someone staged it. He's alive." Jake frowned. "You think they faked the crash?" "Think I know it." She pointed to the static pattern on the radar. "That burst wasn't random. It's a data cloak, old Cold War tech. You scramble radar, fake descent telemetry, then drop below satellite coverage. Classic extraction." "Extraction by who?" Sarah looked up, meeting his eyes. "Whoever paid him." The C-17 banked north. New coordinates flashed across the screen. Icelandic corridor, civilian airspace window. Harrison's orders followed seconds later. Confirm survival. Intercept if possible. Extreme discretion. Sarah buckled in, adrenaline burning through fatigue. Wheels down in 20. Prepare ground recon. Jake grinned grimly. "Back in the field, huh?" She flexed her bandaged hand. "Never left." The landing strip in Keflavik was deserted at dawn. Gray skis, wet asphalt, a wind that cut straight through bone. Their transport, a matte black SUV, waited by the hangar. Within minutes they were on the coastal road, fog swallowing the landscape. Sarah scanned the map on her lap. Satellite picked up heat signatures 30 clicks north, abandoned NATO relay station. Jake raised an eyebrow. "That's convenient." "Convenient means deliberate," she said. "Someone's expecting company." The road ended in cliffs overlooking a steel structure half buried in rock. Once, it relayed Cold War signals to submarines. Now it pulsed faintly with new life, diesel generator, comms dish still rotating. Jake checked his weapon, 2 guards outside. Sarah nodded. "Non-lethal, we need answers." They moved like ghosts through mist, low, efficient, silent. In 30 seconds, both guards lay unconscious. Sarah dragged one aside, stripped his ID, and keyed open the main door. The air inside was stale, humming with recycled heat. Old electronics blinked under layers of dust, but one corridor glowed with fresh fluorescent light. Sarah's pulse steadied. "He's here." They found Daniel Laird in the control room. He was alone, sitting at a terminal surrounded by open cases of cash and encrypted drives. The perfect picture of calm, except for the sweat glistening on his temple. He didn't flinch when they entered. "You're faster than I expected." Sarah stopped a few paces away. "You staged your own death." "I prefer the term strategic disappearance," he said smoothly. "You'd understand that, wouldn't you, Raven 7? Jake's hand tightened on his weapon. "You've got nerve talking like that." Laird smiled faintly. "Nerve built empires." Sarah studied him. "You sold 8 people for profit. You leaked missions that killed civilians. For what? Money." "For balance," he said simply. "You think your government's clean. I sold to both sides. When one lies too much, you give truth to the other. Keeps the world honest." Sarah's voice hardened. "You call treason honesty. I call it survival." She circled him slowly. "Webb said the same thing before they took him." Laird chuckled. "And you believed he was the top. You still think this ends with me." Her silence was answer enough. He leaned back, watching her with the calm of a man certain of his insurance. "You can shoot me right now, but it won't matter. There are others, Banker 0, the architect. I was a facilitator. replaceable. Jake's eyes flicked to Sarah. He's bluffing. Laird shook his head. No bluff. You pull one thread, the whole fabric unravels. Sarah drew closer, rainwater still dripping from her jacket. Where? Laird hesitated, eyes flicking toward a small case on the console. Coordinates. You'll need clearance to open it. Jake moved to grab it, but Laird's hand shot out, revealing a small detonator. Easy. It's keyed to my heartbeat. You shoot me, the data fries itself. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. You think that scares me? I think you understand leverage, he said. You always did. Something in his tone stopped her. Familiar, almost intimate, like a whisper from an old handler. Who trained you? She asked. He smiled. Ask your director. Her stomach turned cold. Harrison. Laird's smile widened. She built the banker program before you ever joined the agency. Jake blinked. What? Sarah's breath hitched, the edges of the world tightening around her. You're lying. Am I? He asked softly. You think ghosts like you happen by accident. You were a prototype, the perfect operative, patriotic, obedient, disposable. The detonator light blinked faster. Jake moved first, lunging to disarm him, but Laird twisted, smashing the device against the console. Sparks erupted, screens flaring red. Data purge initiated, the system warned. Kill the power, Sarah shouted. She dove for the breaker panel, tearing cables with her left hand. Jake ripped open another line. Static crackled, the air stinking of ozone. The screens flickered, half corrupted but still readable, lines of coordinates, one repeating at the top. Camp Raven/Archive 1. Sarah froze. That's not a location, that's a burial code. What the hell does that mean? Jake demanded. It means we weren't the only ones they buried. Before she could say more, Laird lunged for a weapon under the desk. The shot cracked through the room. Jake fired once, clean, center mass. The banker staggered, disbelief etched across his face. He sank to the floor, blood dark against steel. The detonator clattered from his fingers, light extinguished. Sarah knelt beside him, gripping his collar. Who's Banker Zero? He coughed, crimson bubbling on his lips. You already know. His eyes rolled back before she could ask again. The console went dark. Silence filled the relay station except for the echo of rain on the roof. Jake exhaled. Tell me we got something from that mess. Sarah rose slowly, hand trembling. We got a name and a direction. She picked up the scorched case Laird had been guarding. Half its edge was melted, but the lock still blinked amber. Jake asked, You think it's real? I think it's bait, she said, but bait leads somewhere. Outside, the wind had turned vicious, slicing through fog. The SUV waited where they'd left it, headlights glowing faintly through the storm. Sarah paused at the door, looking back once at the silent building. Jake followed her gaze. You all right? No, she said honestly, but I'm still moving. He nodded. That's enough. Back in the vehicle, Sarah opened the file Laird had tried to destroy. Through static and damage, a single line of metadata survived. Project Cassandra primary contact, Harrison E. Jake saw it too. That's. I know, Sarah whispered. Outside, lightning split the sky again, reflecting in her eyes. The betrayal she'd chased for 3 years had just turned inward. She leaned back against the seat, whispering to herself. They built me to be a weapon. Now they'll learn what happens when a weapon remembers she's human. Jake said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The convoy rolled into the storm, heading toward whatever truth still waited ahead. And above them the clouds flashed once, brief, violent, like a heartbeat before revelation. How do you confront someone who gave you life and then used it to destroy you? The hum of the engines filled the SUV as it cut through the Icelandic fog. The horizon was a smear of gray sea and darker sky, no line between them, just endless nothing. Inside, the silence was sharp enough to hurt. Sarah Mitchell sat motionless in the back seat, her face half-lit by the glow of the recovered file. Project Cassandra primary contact, Harrison E. Every second she stared at it. Her heartbeat slowed until it felt like something deep inside her had turned to stone. Jake drove in silence, knuckles tight on the steering wheel. He didn't ask questions. He could read her expression. Whatever the file meant, it had rewritten the last 10 years of her life in real time. Finally she spoke, her voice flat. "Turn around." Jake glanced in the mirror. "Sarah, turn around." He did, no hesitation. He'd seen that tone before, in people who just found the truth and were about to burn the world to get to it. The airfield was silent when they returned. The C-17 sat on the tarmac under thin daylight, engines cooling, frost gathering along its wings. Technicians moved quietly, pretending not to notice the storm that stepped off the SUV. Sarah walked straight past them toward the command tent, soaked boots tracking mud across the aluminum floor. The guards at the entrance tried to stop her, then saw her face and didn't. Inside, Director Harrison stood beside a table of open maps and data pads, already debriefing with General Barrett. Both turned at the sound of Sarah's footsteps. Harrison's face softened instantly. "Thank God, we lost your signal for 6 hours. Did you get him?" Sarah dropped the scorched case on the table. It clanged loud against the metal. "We got him," she said, "and something else." Barrett frowned. "What is that?" "Laird's backup drive," Sarah said. "He didn't destroy it completely." "Good work," Harrison said. "Our analysts." But Sarah's tone cut through the air like a blade. "It's your name on it." Harrison froze. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. The sound of the rain outside filled the gap. "My name," Harrison said finally, her voice calm but quieter now. Sarah pushed the tablet forward. "Project Cassandra, you were the primary contact." Barrett looked between them, confused. "What the hell is Cassandra?" "Don't," Sarah said sharply, eyes still locked on Harrison. "Don't act surprised." "I'm not acting," Harrison said carefully. "I haven't heard that name in years." "So you admit it existed?" Harrison's silence was all the admission she needed. Jake stepped closer, tension bleeding through his posture. "Director, what was Cassandra?" Barrett's voice rumbled low. "I've never seen this in any file." "You wouldn't," Harrison said finally. She took a slow breath, looking suddenly older, like the years had just caught up to her. Cassandra wasn't official. It was an experimental directive under Joint Ops and the CIA, a contingency designed for off-the-books conflicts. Sarah's jaw tightened. "Contingency, that's one word for it." Harrison's eyes flicked to her. It was meant to create independent operatives, agents who could function autonomously without oversight, without supply lines, people who could disappear into deep cover and survive anywhere. "Like me," Sarah said quietly. "Yes," Harrison said. "You were part of the first wave." Jake's stomach dropped. "She's saying they built you." Sarah's eyes didn't leave Harrison. "So I was never recruited. I was manufactured." Harrison shook her head. "You were trained. You had potential, drive, resilience." "I was selected," Sarah interrupted, voice rising now. "Because I fit a profile. Because I had no children, no living family, no ties that made me inconvenient to erase." Barrett looked sick. "My God." Sarah stepped closer to the table. "Cassandra was supposed to create operatives who could vanish. But you didn't tell us we were test subjects. You didn't tell us you were running behavioral conditioning." Harrison didn't deny it. "We had to know who could handle psychological collapse." "You broke us," Sarah hissed, "then called it training." "It was war," Harrison said sharply, "and war doesn't wait for ethics." Sarah's fist slammed into the table. The sound echoed through the tent. "War doesn't justify betrayal," she said. "You turned us into ghosts, then left us behind when the mission went wrong." Harrison's face tightened. Damascus wasn't my call, you were compromised. I was abandoned. The words landed like gunfire. You needed a scapegoat when the op leaked, so you declared me dead. You let them torture me for 72 hours while you scrubbed the records. Jake's hands clenched at his sides. He'd seen interrogation survivors before, but never one who carried it so quietly. Now the dam was cracking. Harrison didn't move. "We thought you were dead," she said finally. "If I'd known." Sarah's laugh was hollow. Don't lie to me again." Barrett broke the silence. If Cassandra was buried, why bring it back? Harrison exhaled. Because it never stayed buried. Laird stole its funding matrix and used it as cover for the banker program. He repurposed the off-ledger channels for profit. "So you created the system that allowed him to sell us out," Sarah said. "You built the cage he sold keys for." Harrison didn't argue. "I built it to protect this country." "And how many people died for that protection?" Sarah asked softly. "My husband, my team, 7 others who trusted you." Barrett's voice was a low growl. "If this gets out." Harrison nodded. "It won't, it can't." Sarah's head snapped up. "Excuse me." "You heard me," Harrison said. "If Cassandra goes public, everything collapses. The program, the agency, the military chain of command. Thousands of operations compromised. The enemy wouldn't even need to hack us. They'd just sit back and watch us burn." Jake stepped forward. "So what, you're going to cover it up?" Harrison met his gaze. "I'm going to contain it." Sarah shook her head slowly. "That's exactly what you said the first time." The tent went quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Harrison's voice softened. "Sarah, you can't undo what's already done, but you can help control how it ends. Help me stabilize the aftermath. Bring in the remaining nodes quietly. No trials, no headlines, no chaos." Sarah stared at her. "You want me to clean up your sins?" "I want you to prevent a war," Harrison said. "If this explodes, countries will start hunting our people. Our allies will turn on us. You know how fast the truth spreads when it's ugly enough." Barrett looked uneasy. "She's right about that." Sarah didn't move. Her breathing was steady, too steady. That kind of calm was dangerous. "Tell me something," she said finally. "When David died, was that also part of Cassandra?" Harrison hesitated. He wasn't supposed to be there. Sarah's hand twitched. "Answer the question." "Yes," Harrison said quietly. "He was collateral." The room tilted. For a moment everything, the hum of lights, the voices, the cold air, fell away. Collateral. That word had haunted every mission report she'd ever read. It was how bureaucrats said we stopped caring. Jake took a step forward, ready to intervene, but Sarah lifted her hand, a small motion that froze him in place. Her voice, when it came, was almost a whisper. "You killed the only good thing I had left." Harrison's eyes glistened. "I didn't pull the trigger." "You signed the order," Sarah said. "I signed 100 orders," Harrison said softly, "and every one of them felt like pulling a trigger." Silence. Then Sarah exhaled, slow, deliberate. "You said earlier that war doesn't wait for ethics," she said. "Maybe it should." She picked up the scorched case from the table, tucking it under her arm. "You won't contain this." Harrison straightened. "You're walking out of here with classified evidence. That's treason." Sarah turned to the door. "You'd know." Barrett tried to block her path. "Mitchell, Sarah, don't do this. There's protocol." "There's conscience," she said. "That's what's left when protocol burns." Outside, the wind screamed across the tarmac, tugging at her jacket as she walked. The cold bit through the stitches on her hand, but she barely felt it. Jake caught up to her halfway to the jet. "You're leaving." "Not leaving," she said, "finishing." He fell into step beside her. "You know she'll come after you." "She already did, years ago." Jake hesitated. "Where will you go?" Sarah looked toward the horizon where the first weak light of dawn fought through the clouds. "Where it started. Cassandra's archive site. If it exists, that's where the proof is. And if it does? She looked at him, then I end it anyway. Back in the command tent, Harrison watched her go. Rain streaked across the window, blurring Sarah's figure into a ghost against the gray. Barrett said quietly, "You're not going to stop her." Harrison's hands tightened behind her back. "You don't stop a storm. You just hope it doesn't destroy everything in its path." Barrett exhaled, "You think she'll find it?" Harrison's eyes stayed on the disappearing figure. "She already has, she just doesn't know it yet." Hours later, high above the Atlantic again, Sarah sat alone in the C-17's hold, the case beside her. Jake had insisted on joining. She hadn't said no. He broke the silence. "You believe her?" "I believe she's good at lying," Sarah said, "but not perfect." "What's the plan?" She looked out the small circular window. The ocean below stretched forever, cold and endless. "Find Cassandra's archive. Expose what's left. Make sure no one ever builds another version of me." Jake nodded slowly. "And if Harrison tries to stop you?" Sarah turned back, eyes like flint. "Then the hunter becomes the hunted." Outside, the world lightened into pale blue dawn. The storm had broken. Inside, another kind of storm gathered, quiet, inevitable, righteous. And as Sarah closed her eyes for the first time in days, her husband's voice came back in memory, low and warm, echoing through time. "Sometimes truth doesn't save you. It just makes sure you die clean." She whispered the words into the silence, as if promising him she finally understood. Because in the end, survival wasn't the victory. Remembering who you were before they broke you, that was. What happens when the truth you hunt starts hunting you back? The C-17 touched down in northern Scotland under a sky the color of steel. Wind howled across the barren hills, bending the grass like waves. To the east, the sea stretched endless, gray and merciless. Sarah Mitchell stepped off the ramp into the cold, the scorched black case still clutched in her left hand. Jake followed, hood pulled up, his breath a thin mist in the wind. "You sure this is it?" he asked. Sarah's eyes traced the cliffs ahead. If Cassandra ever had a burial site, it's here. Remote, off-grid, perfect for deniability. He adjusted his gear. "Feels like we're walking into a ghost story." She almost smiled. "We are the ghosts." A lone van waited at the edge of the airfield, unmarked, old enough to be invisible. Inside was a single contact, a quiet, bearded man who introduced himself as Reese, a former GCHQ technician turned whistleblower. His hands shook slightly as he handed Sarah a tablet. "This came through encrypted channels 2 hours ago," he said. "A ping from a dormant server, tagged CAS-01. It's located under a decommissioned naval bunker near Cape Wrath." Sarah studied the coordinates. "How secure?" "Unknown. No active power grid, no signals going out. But something's drawing current down there. Steady pulse every 40 seconds. Jake frowned. "Could be a generator." "Or a heartbeat," Sarah murmured. Reese looked nervous. "You didn't hear it from me." She handed him a folded envelope. "You didn't hear anything from anyone." The road to Cape Wrath was little more than gravel and wind. For 2 hours they drove through silence, the kind that pressed in on you, thick with old secrets. The sea roared below the cliffs, black waves smashing against rock. Jake finally broke the quiet. "If Harrison really built Cassandra, why tell you part of the truth?" Sarah watched the horizon. "Because she's buying time." "For what?" "For cleanup. For erasing what's left before I find it." Jake grunted. "Then we'd better move fast." She nodded. "We will." By dusk, they reached the old naval perimeter, rusted fences, crumbling towers, the smell of salt and iron. The entrance to the bunker lay half buried in moss, a steel hatch barely visible under decades of decay. Sarah knelt, brushing away dirt until the faded emblem appeared. "Cassandra Unit, EYES only." She traced the letters with her fingertips. It's real. Jake set a charge and stepped back. After you. The small detonation echoed like thunder against the cliffs. The hatch groaned open, exhaling dust and cold air from a world forgotten. Inside, the tunnel descended into darkness. Their flashlights sliced through it, revealing concrete corridors, rusted signage, cables dangling like veins. Every step echoed. The deeper they went, the colder it became. "What's the plan?" Jake whispered. "Find the power source," she said. "If something's still active, it's guarding data." They reached a sealed door at the lowest level. A biometric scanner blinked red beside it, still functioning after decades. Jake raised an eyebrow. "How's that possible?" Sarah stared at the scanner. "Backup cell, I know the system." She placed her left hand on the plate. It flashed red, denied. Then slowly, she raised her damaged right hand, trembling, and pressed it to the scanner. The light turned green. Jake's breath caught. "You're still in the system." "I was never out," she said. The door hissed open. The chamber beyond was vast, a control room frozen in time. Rows of old terminals glowed dimly, powered by some unseen generator. In the center, a single mainframe pulsed faint blue. Above it, faded letters read. "Cassandra Archive, active operations suspended." Jake swept his light across the walls. "Looks like a tomb." Sarah stepped forward slowly. "It is." She approached the console, connecting the case's data port to an ancient terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the cracked screen. ACCSSING, classified FILES/project Cassandra/clearance, Raven 7. Jake glanced at her. "Guess you're still the key." "Let's see what you built, Director," she murmured. File after file appeared: mission logs, agent dossiers, psychological profiles. Faces of operatives long dead or erased flickered past, each tagged with notes: behavioral instability, high adaptability, terminated. And then her own file. MITCHELL, Sarah/Raven07. Operative performance, exceptional. Psychological resilience, beyond prediction. Recommend further isolation tests. Status expendable. Use as final phase prototype. Her pulse roared in her ears. Jake leaned in. Expendable. She scrolled further. At the bottom of the report, a final note appeared, hand-signed. Authorized by Harrison E. Her throat tightened. For a second, the edges of her vision blurred. "She signed my death," she whispered, "months before Damascus." Jake's voice was low. "You were never meant to come back." "No," she said. "I was meant to prove it could work." The terminal beeped an alert. New text flashed on the screen. "Remote access DETACTED link initiated/secure line. HQ Harrison." Sarah's stomach turned to ice. Jake looked at her. "She's tapping in." Sarah nodded. "She's been watching us the whole time." The speakers crackled. Harrison's voice filled the chamber, calm, composed. "Sarah." Sarah stepped closer to the console. "Director." "I told you not to come here." "You told me a lot of things," Sarah said. "Most of them lies." "You don't understand what you've opened," Harrison said. "Those files can't exist. Cassandra wasn't just an experiment, it was a containment measure." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Containment for what?" "For us," Harrison said. "For people like you." The room went silent, except for the soft hum of machines. "You think I built Cassandra to create super soldiers," Harrison continued. "I built it because the agency was already losing control of the ones they made before you. Operatives without fear, without empathy. We called them phantoms. They stopped following orders." Jake muttered, "Jesus." Harrison's voice was steady. "Cassandra was meant to study how to give them conscience again. You were the only one who passed. You felt guilt. You felt loss. That's why I chose you." Sarah shook her head slowly. "You didn't give me a conscience. You broke me until I found one on my own." That's exactly what saved you, Harrison said. And it's why you have to walk away now. Those archives include names, men and women still active. If they find out Cassandra's open, they'll erase you before I can stop them. Sarah looked at the screen. You mean before I erase you? Static hissed, Harrison's tone tightening. You don't want this war, Sarah. I didn't start it. Neither did I. Sarah's voice softened, almost weary. Maybe that's the problem. Everyone keeps saying they didn't start it, and no one remembers how to end it. She reached for the keyboard. Don't, Harrison warned. But Sarah was already typing, commands firing across the screen, unlocking restricted segments. Jake watched as file trees expanded like veins through the mainframe. What are you doing? He asked. Downloading everything, she said. If the truth dies, we die with it. Harrison's voice cracked for the first time. Sarah, listen to me. You release that data, and there will be no agency left to protect anyone. You'll destroy what's left of our security. Sarah's fingers paused over the keys. Maybe that's what needs to happen. You'll kill good people, Harrison pleaded. People who believe in what we do. Sarah whispered, then maybe they'll learn to believe in why we do it. And she hit enter. The servers screamed to life. Lights flared red. Warnings flashed. Data exfiltration in progress. Jake grabbed her shoulder. We gotta move. She unplugged the drive, yanking the case free just as the systems began self-purge. Alarms howled. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Backup's fried, Jake shouted. She's burning the place down. Then we leave it buried, Sarah said. They ran through collapsing corridors as the bunker groaned around them. Metal twisted, concrete cracked. The hum of the generator turned to a dying scream. Outside, the wind hit them like a wave. They stumbled into the rain just as the tunnel imploded behind them, a plume of smoke and dust swallowing the entrance. Jake coughed, clutching his side. Tell me that drive survived. Sarah held up the case, cracked, scorched, but still intact. Barely. Then let's get the hell out before she sends someone to finish the job. Sarah looked back at the ruined hillside. Smoke drifted into the sea. She already has. 2 hours later, in a small cottage outside Inverness, they caught their breath. The storm had quieted, leaving only the steady tap of rain on old glass. Jake patched her hand, the gauze stained from reopening wounds. You think Harrison'll try again? He asked. She won't need to, Sarah said. The people behind Cassandra will. Then what's next? She stared into the fire for a long moment. We go dark, get the truth somewhere she can't reach it. Jake frowned, like where? Someplace that still believes in truth for its own sake. She handed him a small slip of paper. A journalist, Geneva. Her father died under Cassandra. She's been chasing whispers for years. Jake read the name. You trust her. I trust the dead, Sarah said quietly. They never lie. The fire crackled. Wind pressed against the windows. For the first time since Damascus, Sarah felt something like exhaustion instead of rage. Jake studied her. If this leaks, they'll call you a traitor. She looked up at him, eyes heavy but clear. I stopped caring what they call me the day I buried David. He nodded slowly. Then I'm with you. She smiled faintly. You don't even know where this ends. Jake shrugged. Doesn't matter. Someone's got to make sure the truth gets there. Sarah's expression softened. You were supposed to be Delta Force, not a martyr. He grinned. Guess I got promoted. Outside, dawn broke through the storm. Light spilled across the sea, turning the waves gold for a moment before fading back to gray. Sarah stood at the window, the case under her arm, the horizon reflected in her eyes. Behind her, Jake spoke quietly. You think Harrison meant what she said, about you being different? Sarah didn't answer right away. Then. Maybe she was right. Maybe I am different, but not because of Cassandra. Then what? She turned, voice barely above a whisper. Because I learned that conscience isn't weakness, it's rebellion. The wind eased. Somewhere out there, the world kept spinning, indifferent to ghosts, to betrayals, to the woman who refused to die the way they planned. Sarah exhaled, closing her eyes. Tomorrow Geneva, then the world. For now, she allowed herself one moment of silence, just enough to remember what peace might have felt like once. But peace, she knew, was a luxury for people who hadn't learned the cost of truth. And truth, once woken, never sleeps again. What happens when the truth finally escapes? Does it set you free, or finish what's left of you? 2 days later, Geneva glimmered under soft rain, the kind that turned glass and steel into mirrors. Somewhere above that mirror, a gray-skinned sky held its breath. Sarah Mitchell walked through the morning crowd wearing a plain coat, her hair tied back, the black case slung across her shoulder like an afterthought. To the world, she looked like any traveler. To herself, she felt like the final bullet in a long-spent magazine. Jake kept pace beside her. He'd shaved, changed jackets, disappeared into the noise of the city. Yet every movement stayed alert, bodyguard and ghost rolled into one. "You sure about this?" he asked as they crossed into the plaza outside the UN annex. "No," she said, "but I'm done hiding behind maybe." They passed diplomats, tourists, beggars. Nobody noticed two ghosts threading through the crowd with the truth of a generation in their hands. The meeting point was a cafe, quiet, narrow, with fogged windows that smelled of roasted beans and paper. At a corner table sat a woman in her 40s, pale eyes, reporter's posture, Clara Hess, freelance journalist known for chasing rumors the powerful wanted buried. "Raven 7, Clara said as they approached. Her voice carried both awe and sorrow. "I thought you were dead." "So did everyone," Sarah replied. "That's what made it easier to listen." Jake scanned the street through the window. "We don't have long." Clara nodded. "You brought proof." Sarah placed the case on the table. "Everything. Cassandra, the banker network, the internal authorizations. It's all here." Clara touched the case like it might burn her. "If half of this is true, it'll tear governments apart." "That's the point," Sarah said. "Let them rebuild with honesty for once." Clara studied her. "And you'll be hunted." "I already am." While Clara connected her encrypted reader, Jake leaned close to Sarah. "You trust her to publish it clean?" Sarah's eyes stayed on Clara's trembling hands. "Her father was one of the test subjects. She's not chasing fame. She's chasing closure." The tablet blinked green. "Upload initiated." Lines of data streamed upward into the secure net. For a moment, the hum of the cafe faded. It felt like the entire world had narrowed to that progress bar. When it hit 100%, Sarah exhaled. "It's done." Clara looked up. "You realize what happens next, don't you?" "Yeah," Sarah said softly. "People will finally stop asking why I came back." Outside, the bells of St. Pierre began to ring. Inside, Sarah felt the tremor before she saw it, vibration in the window glass, low and rhythmic. "Engines." Jake's voice dropped. "We've got company." Two black sedans rolled into the plaza, unmarked but unmistakable. The way they moved, controlled, surgical, spoke of people who never missed twice. Sarah's pulse steadied. "They traced the upload." "Or someone told them," Jake said, eyes on Clara. But Clara shook her head fiercely. "I used a satellite relay. They shouldn't have." "Doesn't matter," Sarah cut in. "Move." They exited through the kitchen, back into rain that now fell in sheets. The alley smelled of smoke and fuel. Jake drew his weapon. 3 agents, maybe 4. Sarah's voice was low. "No killing unless we have to." "Since when did that stop them?" She smiled faintly. "Since we started giving them witnesses." The first agent appeared from the corner, visor down, rifle raised. Sarah moved first, stepping into the blind spot, one smooth motion. The butt of her weapon struck his helmet, Another twist disarmed him. He crumpled silently. Jake covered the exit, firing a controlled burst into the tires of the lead sedan. Steam hissed. Screams of metal and brakes filled the street. Clara ducked behind a doorway, clutching the drive to her chest. Sarah grabbed her wrist. "Run, north end of the bridge. You'll find a contact waiting." "What about you?" Clara gasped. Sarah's answer was simple. "I'm the distraction." They split. Jake followed Sarah into the main street, rain slicing between them and the approaching sedans. Sirens began to echo far off, too organized to be local police. He shouted over the storm, "They'll cordon the district." "Then we make it messy," she called back. They darted into an underpass lined with flickering lights. The echo of footsteps multiplied, agents closing in from both ends. Jake checked his ammo, 2 mags left. Sarah's eyes flicked to a maintenance door halfway down. "Vent tunnel, go." He hesitated. "You first." She shook her head. "I stay, you make sure she gets clear." "Not a chance." "Jake," she began, but stopped when he met her gaze. "We finish what we started," he said. For a second, the world shrank to that. 2 soldiers who'd run out of orders but not courage. Then the agents hit from both sides. The fight was fast, brutal, silent except for the wet crack of fists and the thud of bodies hitting concrete. Sarah's movements were pure instinct, efficient, economical, merciless. But there were too many. A rifle butt caught her across the ribs. She stumbled, gasped, swung back. Her bandaged hand split open, blood mixing with rain. Jake dragged her toward the tunnel door, kicking it open. They fell through together, slamming it behind them. The dark swallowed them whole. They ran until the light vanished, and the only sound was their breath. The tunnel opened into a drainage basin near the Rhone River, moonlight shimmering through the grates above. Jake collapsed against the wall. "Tell me the file got out." Sarah listened to the faint hum of the world above, the quiet digital heartbeat of something new. "It's everywhere now. You can't kill an idea once it's loose." Jake laughed weakly. "Then maybe it was worth it." She smiled, small and tired. "Maybe." Outside, helicopters began to circle. Jake looked up. "They'll find us." "Good," she said. "Then we end this clean." Minutes later, headlights cut through the fog. A black SUV stopped 20 meters away. Doors opened. Director Harrison stepped out. No guards, no armor, just her. Rain beaded on her coat, her hair soaked. She looked older now, haunted. "Sarah," she called softly. Jake lifted his weapon, but Sarah touched his arm. "Stand down." Harrison approached slowly, stopping 5 paces away. "I should arrest you." "You tried," Sarah said. "Do you know what you've done?" Harrison's voice trembled, not with anger but fatigue. "You've exposed decades of classified work. Alliances will fracture. People will die." "They were already dying," Sarah said quietly. "We just stopped pretending they didn't." Harrison shook her head. "You think the world forgives truth. It devours it." "Then let it," Sarah said. "Better to be eaten by honesty than poisoned by lies." Lightning flashed over the river. For a heartbeat, both women were silhouettes, creator and creation, mother and weapon, mirror and reflection. Harrison's voice softened. "I never wanted it to end like this." Sarah's tone matched hers. "Neither did I, but you built something that couldn't end any other way." She stepped closer until they were face to face. "You told me once I was different. You were right. I still believe in conscience." "And what does conscience tell you now?" Harrison asked. "That mercy's not the same as forgetting." Sarah lowered her weapon. Harrison's eyes glistened. "Then what now? You disappear again." Sarah looked toward the river. "No, this time I live." The helicopters closed in, floodlights flaring. Harrison lifted her hands, signaling the agents to hold. For the first time in years, her authority looked fragile. She turned back to Sarah. "Go, before I change my mind." Sarah hesitated. Why? Harrison's voice cracked. Because for once I want to be on the right side of the story. They locked eyes, a silent acknowledgement that forgiveness was impossible, but decency still mattered. Then Sarah nodded once, turned, and vanished into the storm. By dawn, Geneva was chaos. News channels screamed with leaks, black budgets, covert programs, names of the dead. Cassandra was no longer a secret. It was a reckoning. Governments denied, then admitted, then begged for context. Harrison resigned before they could fire her. General Barrett retired quietly, a man too old for new wars. And somewhere, in a safe house along the French border, Sarah watched the world remember what it had tried to forget. Jake entered with 2 coffees. You're on every channel. She smiled faintly. Then maybe they'll stop calling me a ghost. He sat beside her, watching the sunrise bleed through clouds. What now? Sarah thought for a long moment before answering. I think we stop running from peace, maybe even chase it. Think we'll catch it? Maybe not, she said, but some things are worth chasing even if you never catch them. He handed her a folded newspaper. On the front page, Raven 7, the woman who ended the silence. Beneath it, a photograph, grainy, distant, taken through rain. Her silhouette crossing the bridge, the raven tattoo faintly visible through her soaked shirt. She studied it for a long time. Then she whispered, he would have hated the attention. David, Jake asked. She nodded. He used to say dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Jake smiled. Sounds like you. She looked out at the sky, the soft blue breaking through gray. No, I just finally learned to listen. For a while they said nothing. The radio played softly, reports of reforms, arrests, debates. The world was shifting, painfully but honestly. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a single dog tag, the last piece of her husband. She hung it from the window latch, letting the morning light catch it. For the ones who didn't get to choose, she said quietly, may their silence mean something now. Jake nodded. What about you? What'll you do? She smiled, small and sure. Live like a civilian, grow something instead of breaking it. He chuckled. You, gardening. Maybe, she said, even scars need sunlight. Outside, a new day spread across Europe, imperfect, raw, but awake. The storm had ended, but the air still smelled like thunder. And somewhere between shadow and sunrise, the woman they mocked for her broken hand walked into anonymity again, not vanishing, but returning to life. Her story was over. Her legend had just begun. Because sometimes the strongest soldiers aren't the ones who keep fighting. They're the ones who finally choose to stop. And sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.